So Nick Bond's my name. I work at La Trobe University and I'm a freshwater ecologist based up in Albury-Wodonga. Today I talked about the impacts of farm dams on the hydrology of small creeks and streams and how that alters the permanence of flow in those habitats and what impacts that then has on the ecology. When we talk about and think about water management particularly in the Murray-Darling Basin, we tend to think a lot about the really big rivers and the water recovery process that's occurred through the basin plan. And I guess again today I was really wanting to emphasise that there's some big impacts that can also occur in these small streams that we are yet to really well address. So farm dams they actually don't capture big volumes of water, but because during summer the evaporation means that the water levels drop, when they're placed in headwaters of catchments, they need to fill up again before flows will start to filter down into the downstream rivers. And that delay from them starting to fill to when they'll actually deliver that water downstream can mean that there's much longer periods when there's no flow in those rivers downstream. And that's meant that there's significant changes in the permanence of flow and wet habitat in those areas. And we've done a lot of work in central Victoria, particularly around Euroa, understanding the impacts of that on fish communities and macroinvertebrates. And we now know really well that when you lose those habitats, that places populations under increasing stress. And so today I wanted to highlight that problem, but also emphasise that it is a problem which is solvable, because farm dams are actually valued in the landscape, obviously by farmers and by landholders in terms of being able to provide access to water for stock. And as Don Driscoll pointed out, they are actually important habitats for other biota, so things like frogs and birds often frequent those habitats, particularly if they're in good condition. In the Mount Lofty ranges in South Australia, there's been some really nice work done over the last decade or so to work with landholders to emphasise the impacts of farm dams on downstream biodiversity, but also to develop technical solutions to try and minimise that impact. And so they've developed what we call low flow bypasses, which allow some of the flows that go into farm dams to pass downstream into the downstream river channels. And in fact, they've just recently begun to invest close to $500 million. So this is still expensive, but invest large sums of money installing these low flow bypasses to try and preserve or reinstate some of the stream flow that's been lost as a result of farm dams in the Mount Lofty ranges. So for me, I think it's a really nice example of a solution being applied which doesn't take away farm dams and the role they play in supporting farming. But the other thing about farm dams too is because most farmers have one on their land, it's a really distributed problem, and to me that seems to align very much with the sort of opportunities and solutions that Biolinks Alliance is trying to help foster. So yeah, I hope it was a useful and interesting presentation.